I am so glad you're here. Welcome, welcome. You're listening to Who Do You Think You Are? A podcast to help you learn how to have the highest regard for yourself, how to live from a place of genuine self-love and self-respect, and how to make yourself a priority in your own life. Meet me here each week for curated tips and strategies designed to help you drop your psychological masks, or at least loosen them, and connect with your truest essence and simply live more easily. Because we know that when we do these things, we naturally invite others to do the same. We have more generosity, more bandwidth, more love for others. And isn't that a beautiful thing, listeners? If you've been listening to the podcast, you know that this show is about radical, not only self-love, but something that I think is even deeper, self-respect. If you're new to the show, welcome. You are what I would consider, if you're tuning in with interest, you're what I would consider a self-respect builder, a self-love creator. You want to deepen your contribution to this world, and I welcome you. Tonight's episode is entitled, it's a kind of a long title, one of the most important words in just about any language. I'll tell you what that word is in a minute, but I want to frame our conversation tonight by saying we're going to be talking about a mental construct. Now, a construct is nothing more than a lens, in this case, a psychological lens, through which we see both ourselves and the world around us. So we're going to be looking at the lens tonight of black or white thinking. And when I say black or white, I also mean all or nothing, good or bad, right or wrong, this or that. So if you find yourself in that position where your lens primarily consists of these binary choices, then I invite you to come to the front of the room along with me, because I consider myself a recovering black or white thinker. So let's all tune into the way in which we look inward and outward. You know, just a word. Someone asked me the other day how I choose my topics for each episode. And again, you know, the show is about self-love and self-respect, but how I land on a particular topic has everything to do with my conversations with clients during the week and the general themes that come up. If it comes up more than a couple of times, then I think it's relevant for many people. So that's one way in which I choose my topic. The other way is I have to have lived it myself. My clients know that I don't ask them to do anything that I haven't also done or attempted to do in my life. So in that regard, and some of you have heard me say this before, I view myself as kind of a spin instructor, right? I'm working out with you. I'm never on the sidelines, removed and aloof, giving advice. I'm working on my own stuff and deepening myself and my own self-respect along with you. So how I landed on this topic, in addition to talking about it this week with clients, is, you know, I was raised by two wonderful parents, not perfect, but wonderful. And my mother was in the military. You may have heard me mention that. So between her kind of by the book way of doing things and how many years in Catholic school, from nursery through college, with the 10 Commandments and things of that nature, I grew up really operating within my understanding of the letter of the law. And my mom would often say, she had that Southern accent from Arkansas, and she would often say, Kathy, if somebody tells me to walk 3 steps, I'm not going to walk 2.5 steps or 3.25 steps. I'm going to walk 3 steps, just like they told me to do. So you can understand that I came by my black or white thinking pretty honestly. And it served me well. And I was going to say it still does. No, I'm going to rephrase that. But it did serve me well. I knew the rules. I knew what was expected of me, primarily in school. And I knew how to stay within the cones and navigate my early years of schooling. Well, right up through college. So I consider myself somewhat of an authority on binary thinking, black or white, all or nothing, this or that, if you will. So I want to just share a little bit of my own process. I learned through many ways, just because psychology always interested me, and I always like to observe people's behavior and eventually my own behavior. I became aware that life was just too darn big, frankly, and emotions were just too varied and deep and vast to squeeze into my lens, my construct of black or white. So I developed at first an appetite, I would say, but that gave way to a real appreciation for nuance, for layered concepts, which we human beings, we are very layered. We have a lot of nuance to our lives. And I learned to recognize the value in the this and the that, the black and the white. And so what became apparent to me is that this polarity, if you will, is really looking at life through extremes. And if you envision a continuum, that which is on either end is very narrow, isn't it? It's narrow. It's so specific. Um, it's so it's very much a sliver of life. Whereas gray, I hear there are like 50 shades. I don't know, but that gray is so vast. Gray refers to the mid-range of, in this case, our emotions. Gray is where life happens. Life doesn't happen on the ends of the spectrum, in the extremes, in the slivers. It happens in the messy gray. And when you think about, you just have to try to paint a wall gray, and you go to, Benjamin Moore, and you find out just how many shades of gray there are. I think there are more than 50 shades. There's light gray, dark gray, dove gray, charcoal gray, black gray. There's every kind of gray you can imagine. And as human beings with a psychology, of course, we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And in that human experience, we have personalities. And within the construct of personality, there are all of these gradations of gray. So tonight, I want to talk about what we can do to bridge these extremes of black or white, good or bad, all or nothing, right or wrong, yes or no. You can probably think of some others, and if you can, I invite you to write them in the chat. Can you think of what that bridge is? Here's a hint. It's not black or white. Tiny word, 3 letters, acts as a powerful bridge. The word, of course, is and. And. Life is in its messiness. It is black and white. It is good and bad. It is wonderful and horrible. It is glorious and frightening. It is magnificent and cruel. It is expansive and small-minded. I could go on, but that's life. Life is messy. Life is messy. So I think when we talk about moving in from these extreme ends, I think we want to talk about what makes nuance so difficult for many of us to grasp. What is it about that? Why do we cling to all or nothing thinking? The reasons I think are very, very interesting. Have you ever had um, an experience where you felt mixed emotions at the same time, but maybe you didn't know that you were allowed to have mixed feelings? Or perhaps you didn't feel comfortable um, taking, taking a little piece of something for yourself, meaning. A recent example was someone told me that her friend recently got married, right? I bet you can relate to this or something very similar. A friend of hers got married, a very dear friend, and she was very happy for this friend. And she liked her fiance and she really had a good feeling about the marriage. But at the same time, she felt something else. She felt sad, a little envious, actually, and kind of down at first. Why? Because she has not yet involved herself in the kind of relationship she dreams of, one that, of course, she deserves. And she was sad about that. And so seeing her friend get married evoked these mixed emotions, happy, celebratory for her friend, but at the same time, it highlighted her own longing and her own disappointment. So, what did she do? Well, when we have mixed feelings like this, we can feel a little guilty. How can I not be anything but elated for my friend who has this success? I shouldn't feel badly. I shouldn't be thinking about myself. Let me block that off and let me just be happy. Binary. And who was it who said Yogi Berra? I always want to say Yogi Bear, but Yogi Berra said, if there's a fork in the road, take it. And so when we come upon mixed emotions, we tend to want to go either left or right. But really, in the case of this woman who had conflicting feelings about her friend getting married, she learned through our conversation that really both emotions are completely valid. The happiness for her friend stands, and her own melancholy and yearning stands also. So if she could learn to say, and she did in pretty short time, just by recognizing this, the more she learned to say, I feel both happy and sad. I feel both elated and celebratory and a little, a little down. She could then create room in herself to feel all the notes in the octave, if you will. Not the bass, not the treble, but all the notes in the octave. And I think that's what it takes, really, to navigate life more easily and more authentically. So, the word that I think is so important in any language is the word and. I feel this and that, happy and sad, glorious and upset. Now, one of the reasons to get back to nuance, nuance is can be abstract, right? And we humans, we love to give order to things. We love to understand things. And sometimes when an issue, a circumstance, um, when our emotions are more complex, we can be kind of stymied by that. So, in our quest not to be overwhelmed with differences and opposites and contradiction, we can try to cling to one end of the spectrum or the other. It's our way of trying to maintain some control. Oh, the abstractness or the contradiction is just, I don't know what to do with that. So I adjust my lens toward one end or the other. And usually, we do it in a way that doesn't serve our own needs. We do it in a way that somehow denies or diminishes what we feel, or um, what's that word? Detaches. We detach from what we feel. I love that word, detachment, because it really captures what we do with our own inner life sometimes. If it doesn't comport with how we think we are supposed to feel, with how we're supposed to proceed. I find this very interesting. I hope you do too. So, what drives the tendency for either or thinking is easily being overwhelmed with abstract concepts, not knowing what to do with opposite emotions. The tension, this is important, the tension that comes from uh, polar opposites. You know what I mean by tension? It's like this, but that. And so there can be kind of a tautness, if that's a word. You understand my point. And so that's difficult. We tend to ignore it. I'll feel this way instead. So um, we oversimplify, really. And although it makes life easier in the moment, we miss a lot. And if we're having a conflict with someone and we don't insert that and, then we easily slide into, I'm sure this has happened to you, it certainly has happened to me many, many times. We slip into right or wrong. And guess who's right and guess who's wrong? Usually we're wrong, right? Well, not necessarily. Sometimes we have to be right. You know, that's another nuance. Right? Sometimes we have to be right. Why? Because many reasons. One that comes to mind is perhaps we were criticized as a child if we made a mistake. I have a friend who is very successful in business and very much a perfectionist. And I mean, I really appreciated that about her. But she drove herself, really, she suffered with anxiety because of it. And where did this come from? She told me a story one time. When she was in elementary school, not in the primary grades, old enough to make dinner, her father asked her to make a lasagna. He either asked her to make it or maybe she thought she would surprise him. Maybe that's what it was. And she made a lasagna, which was quite an ambitious project for a young girl. And as it happened, she, according to her father, she put way too much salt in the lasagna. And her father was very harsh, I think. He made a scene at the table. He kind of, pushed the dish out of the way, and he didn't eat. He didn't eat it. And of course, she felt horrible. And on some level, she made a vow to herself. I will never put too much salt in the lasagna ever again, which is to say, salt in the lasagna. It's become a mantra for me since she told me the story. Salt in the lasagna means I will never make a mistake again. And so those of us who need to be right and feel righteous, maybe we're afraid of the salt. Maybe we were criticized or put down or ignored or yelled at or punished. There was some price to pay. So we don't like making mistakes. Gray, here's the thing. When we deal with gray, when we enter that zone, because it is nuanced, because it's messy, because it's inexact and imprecise, our judgment might be off from time to time. But if you are terrified of making a mistake and you have no room for that, you're going to struggle. You're going to struggle because there's no room to put the mess. You try to squeeze it all into a lasagna pan that is not aligned with the way life really is. So, hi Wayne, good to hear from you. So there's a lot to digest here. I think I'm going to give us all time to take a moment. I'm going to take a short break in a second and reflect on your own lens. Your own lens. When I think of lens, I think of two things. I think of the eye doctor, but I also think of a camera. And what I remember from the days of my photography school, and there's an aperture that lets the light in. And so what I hope we can do with this conversation, I hope the way it lands is you can widen your aperture and let more light in to how you view yourself and others around you. Because within that gray area, yes, there's room for, mistakes, but there's also room for forgiveness, understanding, and empathy. And don't we need more of those things in the world? So during the break, give thought to your lens, to your aperture. Let's come back. Maybe you'll have some questions. And if not, I'll go to a question or two that I received this morning. I write a newsletter it comes out every Sunday morning at 5 a.m, and it's usually related to the topic that I talk about on the podcast. So readers have an opportunity to write me write in and ask a question or make a comment or share their insights. So someone did that this morning, and it's my pleasure to read it when we come back from the break. If you're just joining us, we are talking about the topic of black or white, all or nothing thinking. It's a lens through which we might look at life, look at ourselves, look at others. And I've been talking about how limiting that can be, because most of life is gray. Most of life happens in the vast mid-range, not on the ends of good or bad, black or white, all or nothing, right or wrong, but rather in that whole range where there are gradations of gray. And we talked a little bit about what might drive this sort of thinking. And it can be fear. It can be anxiety, anxiety about abstract concepts, anxiety about the contradictory nature of life. I was talking about how life is both wonderful and horrible. It's magnificent and cruel. It's happy. It's dark. And of course, the contradiction of all contradictions, or the yin and the yang, however you look at it, light and dark, lightness and darkness itself, right, is one of the fundamental contradictions. But along with contradictions, we can also say they complement one another. And complementarity is also another aspect of life. That's also part of the lens, you know. You know, when the eye doctor, you go for eyeglasses, and I always forget what that kind of doctor that is. Optometrist, somebody tell me. But, you know, the doctor puts the machine in front of you and goes, better one, better two, this lens, that lens, right? But we need both. We need both in order to make a unified whole. So when it comes to radical self-acceptance and self-respect and self-love, we need all of who we are. We need all the notes in the octave, the highs and the lows. We need the good in us, and we need the not so good in us, because rather than black or white, good or bad, it's really and. Each of us is kind of good and kind of bad, kind of dark and kind of light. That's just the fact of the matter. And so it's important. I would submit it's really crucial for successful adult functioning to be able to hold the space and tolerate the tension of this black and white world in which we live, humans that we are. So I noticed there are a couple of comments. Let me take a look. From Patricia. Great topic, Catherine. Thanks for reminding us that it's okay for us to feel this and that, be this and that. I have often felt that I had to be just this or that, rarely both. Yes, Patricia. Yes. And, you know, I don't know that our culture really supports this kind of thinking, you know. But you go on to say, I don't think I knew I could be both sides of the coin. I like how you put that. It's a two-sided coin. And I would say the coin itself, I would call that simply reality. Reality has more than one explanation sometimes. Many things in life can be viewed through this angle or that, this angle and that, this angle and that. I corrected myself. Yeah, it's very freeing to know that we can have all of our feelings, as divergent as they may be from one another. We can have all of our feelings. Yes, you can have all of your feelings. All of your feelings exist, whether or not you realize it, whether or not you pay attention. The reality of our feelings is they are varied. This person I referred to, whose friend got married, whether she leaned into it or not, she felt all the feelings. She felt the happy, sad. So we can deny what we feel, we can minimize it, we can block it out. That doesn't mean it's not there. So the best thing we can do, in my view, is tune in, tap in, pay attention, identify what we feel, and open that space for our own reality. This is how I believe we respect ourselves. We respect the reality of what we feel. So thank you, Patricia. Thank you for that contribution. I want to go to a comment that came in. Very interesting comment. This is from one of my listeners, Janine. And Janine writes, sometimes the moment anything goes wrong, we go into automatic panic mode. Absolutely. Even though we recognize how unconstructive it is. Remind me to talk about intellectualizing. It's a dark impulse. It can be. How can we shift instead into the shade of gray that says, yep, this is a crappy situation, but I can navigate it? In other words, this isn't what I wanted, and I can still be more than okay. Help us to remember that it doesn't have to be all good for it to still end up being plenty good enough. And that our attitude determines more than we realize in any situation. Well, Ginny, this is a mouthful, and it's a delicious mouthful, actually. Sometimes the moment anything goes wrong, we go into panic mode. Of course, because we all do this. We have a vision for how things are supposed to be, how a situation is supposed to go, how something is supposed to unfold, how we are supposed to feel. We have a construct, a picture in our mind, a frame. And if something occurs to us internally or externally that doesn't quite fit within that frame, we can go, holy crap, what do I do? This doesn't feel right. There's something wrong with this, or something wrong with me. Neither is true, actually. There's nothing wrong. It's just that that's the way it is, until and unless we examine and kind of question this construct. Have we been putting this narrow frame around the vastness of life? You know, it's like looking at the Grand Canyon with a very tiny, a very tiny frame. The Grand Canyon. That's our inner life. That's our inner landscape. So we might panic, but the more we understand that ambiguity and uncertainty are legitimate aspects of life, and there's no denying them, the more we can expand and widen our lens. The more we do that, the less opportunity there is for panic. Why? Because there's less to panic about. The panic comes from, this doesn't fit into my framework. Widen the frame, it takes in more information. It takes in more tolerance, hence less to panic about. So Janine, if you're listening, I hope that has merit, but you go on to say, how can we shift instead into the shade of gray that says, yes, this is a crappy situation, but I can navigate it. In other words, this isn't what I wanted, and I can still be more than okay, because within the okay, there are gradations. And I'll tell you, this is another podcast episode, plenty good enough. You see, good and bad don't have to in and of themselves be narrow columns. There are gradations of good. And plenty good enough is plenty good enough. So rather than strive to hit a particular note, I think going for, a melody, to use that analogy, gives us more room, more wiggle room, more breathing room. So plenty good enough is not, I love this, Janine, because good enough isn't just squeaking by, like, oh, it's good enough. It's like the bare minimum. It's good enough. No, good enough is recognition that this is a safety net in some cases. It is a plan in some cases. It is an approach. Maybe if we try to get parenting, now I am not a parent. I have a Morkie, and my hands are full. But those of you who are parents, first of all, I take my hat off to you. And of course, I work a lot with parents, and they feel so badly when they get something wrong. And I talk about, hey, good enough parenting, because good enough parenting is no small thing. So I think there's more. This isn't what I wanted, and I can still be more than okay. Help us remember that it doesn't have to be all good, it can still be plenty good enough, and that our attitude determines more than we realize in any situation. Well, our attitude will soften, will loosen, will relax, our shoulders will drop when we understand, the more we understand, that good enough is really something to shoot for. If you're good enough in your parenting, if you're good enough in your business, if you're good enough as a friend, honor that. Honor that. It's a beautiful thing. So I tell you, I will probably reread this, Janine, every time I come on, because within your question, within your statement is actually the answer. We just need to remember that there's such a thing as good enough. So when I get hard on myself, or I review a podcast episode and I point out every flaw, I'm going to reread your thing, Janine. I'm going to remind myself, maybe I was plenty good enough, and maybe that's okay. And maybe that's what we can help each other do. Because whatever we do with ourselves, good and bad, complete and incomplete, we give others permission to do the same. So if we can develop a plenty good enough attitude about our flaws, guess what? Those we come in contact with, we quietly, without saying a word, give them permission. We make the atmosphere safer for them to feel like it's okay for them to be good enough too. And doesn't that just have a nicer ring to it than I have to get this right? We vibrate on a higher level when we are understanding of ourselves, when we invite ourselves to come forward with the realities of who we are. Now, there are nuances to this conversation, and I hope to be talking about them. I mean, look, I say to clients, I didn't make the rules about how to be a human being. This is just human nature. But by examining these nuances and understanding them and actually appreciating them, life takes on a different flavor. It's something we can savor, something we can work toward with other people in touchy conversations, delicate conversations. If you can go first and let the other person know that you have the and word in your vocabulary, then guess what? Very subtly, very quietly, you plant that seed in the other person. And the rigid or becomes the flexible and. And I just think that makes things better and easier. So I'll check the comments here once again. I see from Dawn, plenty good enough reminds me, need my glasses. Plenty good enough reminds me of my aunt, who had a very positive mindset. She would always answer the question, "Oh, yes, how are you?" She'd say, "I'm good enough." Yes. Yes, I know that aunt, very special person. And she would say that. And it was with, I remember the energy around "I'm good enough" was so lovely and so gentle that it just made you feel good just to be in her company when she said that. She always came from a place of gratitude. She lived a long, healthy, happy enough life. That's beautiful. She lived a long, healthy, and by long, well into her late 90s, a happy enough life. I know this aunt, and it's not that everything was a bowl of cherries, but her attitude, back to Janine's comment about attitude is everything, her attitude was, I just have to be happy enough. Like there's a lot there. That's a buffet table. Happy enough. So thank you, Dawn. Gray gives us room for being works in progress. I love that. And we are works in progress. So even our attempt to hold the space for ambiguity, even that, is evolving. It's not like we get there, we reach the destination. It's not a one and done. It's not I've arrived. It's the more I do this, and the more I do that, and the deeper I go, and the deeper you go. And that's the evolution of our awareness. And with that comes more self-love. And that is an act of self-love and self-respect. We respect the reality of who we are. So thank you. Yes, Wayne, bless us all, indeed. So friends, I hope this landed with you tonight in a way that you can use. I hope tomorrow you take this with you. And as I often say, I feel connected to all of you. I don't know who's listening exactly and who's listening, on the archived versions, but I feel some kind of connection to everyone and anyone who might be listening. So tomorrow, as I live my life mindful of my own lens, I'll be thinking of all of you, and I'll be practicing. And I invite you to do the same, and I invite you to let me know. So if you would, some business before I go, if you would like a copy of my newsletter, it would be delivered in your inbox every Sunday morning at 5 a.m. It's called Sunday Sauce. It's a nod to my Italian heritage, but I've already made enemies because some people call it Sunday gravy. And that's a big controversy among we Italian Americans, but it's called Sunday Sauce. If you would like a copy, just email me at Catherine@catherineduca.com. Just put in the subject newsletter, and you'll be happily and gratefully added to my email list. If you want to read more about my work, I have a book. It's called Unmasked: Discover the Hidden Power of Your True Self. And it is really the heart of my work. And that's available wherever books are sold, but certainly on Amazon. And I'm planning something special for Valentine's Day, actually. It's still in the works, but some kind of workshop-y thing on, Valentine's Day. I'm not a fan, actually, of Valentine's Day. I'm not a fan of Hallmarky, I don't know what you call them, holidays. But I think I'm going to embrace Valentine's Day this year and use it as a I don't know what to call it, as a jumping off point for self-love. Self-love. So stay tuned to that. So friends, coming to the end, it's Sunday night. If you're listening live, and if you're on the East Coast, you might be drifting off to sleep. I hope this landed well. I hope it eases your mind and gives you something to do. When I say do, something to constructively make life easier for yourself. So if you're worried about something tonight, I invite you to put it on the shelf until tomorrow. Whatever problem, whatever issue, I promise you it will be there in the morning. Tackle it when you're fresh. For tonight, just let it go and drift off to sleep, and know that you matter. Know that your thoughts matter, your feelings matter. You matter. And not only do you matter, friends, but you matter a lot. You are loved, and you are love. I wish you a good night. I wish you a good week. I look forward to being back with you next time. Until then, You're listening to Who Do You Think You Are on New Thought Media Network.